guys, I hope you're all feeling fine. So alongside with the types or groups of macroeconomic markets, here is another topic which we, the Group 4, are going to discuss, the circular flow of the economy. But before we proceed to the formal discussion, let's first have a game. This game is called Guess the Scrambled Letters. The mechanics is very simple. It is just that you guys have to guess the word that was scrambled. You have given 5 seconds to guess the word. On a note, these words are not just a word because the terms that you will guess are the same terms that you will encounter as we proceed to the discussion. And this way, you guys will have an idea on what the discussion is all about. So without further ado, let's begin. So that was it, guys. I hope you guessed the words correctly. Now we can proceed to the formal discussion. Thank you for your participation in the game. Bye!
Now that we are done with our icebreaker, we can now proceed to our learning objective, which is first to understand the circular flow of the income between the household, firm, government, and the international economy. These are the reporters that you will encounter in our video lecture. First is Blessie Lastrilla, me, Hermosa, Airesh, Guerrero, Charilie Lopez, Hazel, Kemuel Isaac, Ibias, and Ronalyn Limpiado. Money, goods, and services are constantly being exchanged. Understanding who is making these exchanges and where they are made will help you understand the important role of interdependence and the global economy. The economy consists of millions of people engaged in many activities like buying, selling, working, hiring, manufacturing, and so on. To understand how the economy works, we must find some way to simplify our thinking about all these activities. In other words, we need a model that explains in general terms how the economy is organized and how participants in the economy interact with one another. The diagram that you can see in the screen is what we call a circular flow model of the economy. This model is used to explain the relationship between money, goods, and services.
Economy has two types of decision makers, the household and the firms or businesses. The first type of decision makers is the firms. The firms produce goods and services using inputs such as labor, land, and capital, like buildings and machines. These inputs are called factors of production. The second one is the household. The households own the factors of production and consume all the goods and services that the firms produce.
Household and firms interact in two types of markets. In the markets for goods and services, households are buyers and firms are sellers. In particular, households buy the output of goods and services that firms produce. In the markets for the factors of production, households are sellers and firms are buyers. In these markets, households provide firms with the inputs that the firms use to produce goods and services. The circular flow diagram offers a simple way of organizing all the economic transactions that occur between households and firms in the economy.
The inner loop of the circular flow diagram represents the flow of goods and services between households and firms. The households sell the use of their labor, land, and capital to the firms in the markets for the factors of production. The firm then use these factors to produce goods and services, which in turn are sold to households in the market for goods and services. Hence, the factors of production flow from household to firms, and goods and services flow from firms to household.
The outer loop of circular flow diagram represents the corresponding flows of dollars. The household spends money to buy goods and services from the firm. The firms use some of the revenues from these sales to pay for the factors of production, such as the wages of the workers. What's left is the profit of the firm owners, who themselves are the members of the household. Hence, spending on goods and services flows from the household to firms, and income in the form of wages, rent, and profits flows from the firms to household. And that explains, in the simplest form, how the economy works. In that, it dispenses with details that for some purposes are significant. The details that we have discussed are for the basic understanding of how the economy is organized. Nevertheless, with its simplicity, this circular flow diagram is useful to keep in mind when thinking about how the pieces of economy fit together.
However, the diagram that you can see from the screen is a more complex and realistic circular flow model that would include, for instance, the roles of government. In fact, that more accurately reflects how real economies function. Let's look at the flow of dollars from the viewpoints of these economic actors. First, households receive income and use it to pay taxes to the government, to consume goods and services, and to save through the financial markets. Second, firms receive revenue from the sale of goods and services and use it to pay for the factors of production. Third, both households and firms borrow in financial markets to buy investment goods such as houses and factories. And lastly, the government receives revenue from taxes and uses it to pay for government purchases. Any excess of tax revenue over government spending is called public saving, which can be either positive, a budget surplus, or negative, a budget deficit.
And now, we will give you an example. A real-life situation on how the money and economy works.
Our story begins when Miss Pink decides to buy a box of Yum Yum peas for the modest sum of €1.49. Miss Pink really does love Yum Yum peas. What she doesn't realize is that with this small, seemingly insignificant action, she has set a complex and mysterious mechanism in motion, which experts call the circular flow. In 3 minutes, you will know everything, or almost everything, about this circular flow. Let's go back to Miss Pink as she reaches the checkout. Here we are at the spending stage. As soon as the money leaves Miss Pink's purse, her €1.49 shoots over to the Yum Yum Company. This is where production, the next stage of the circular flow, takes place. Mrs. Violet, the head accountant, is delighted to receive Miss Pink's €1.49. It's the 2073rd box bought today. Business is going well. And as it's the last day of the month, Mrs. Violet will pay all the company's employees their salaries. And that, my friends, is nothing less than income, the third stage of the circular flow. Let's take Mr. Blue, for example, who works in the packaging department. Mr. Blue can't wait to collect his earnings and spend them on holidays. His paycheck in hand, he runs off to buy a ticket to Egypt for €359. So now we find ourselves back at the spending stage. But while Mr. Blue flies off towards the land of Tutankhamun, we embark on another journey. With his money, which moves around in the circular flow, repeating the same stages again and again. Spending, production, income. Whatever we do, we just can't escape them. Spending, production, income, and so on, and so on. For example, Mr. Blue's €359 land in the coffers of the ZWA Travel Company. But watch out! Since the company has already paid all its bills and is making a profit, it decides to distribute dividends to its shareholders. To Mrs. Beige, for example, who heads straight to the spending stage. Mrs. Beige could treat herself to a new hat or some swimming lessons or life insurance, except Mrs. Beige has decided to buy an apartment. She will pay for it with her savings, but also with the help of a loan. The loan is a service provided to Mrs. Beige by her bank, which she will pay for through interest payments. This means there is spending by Mrs. Beige and production by the bank. Let's fast forward a bit to see what will happen to the first payment from Mrs. Beige. Let's see. Now it's reached the bank, who has decided to invest it. That's how Mr. Lavender in the IT department can order a batch of the very latest computers from Top PC 2000. Well, now you're beginning to understand how it all works. What is Top PC 2000 going to do with this money? Pay salaries, pay dividends, build a new factory? Nope. Top PC 2000, like everyone else, has to pay its taxes. And with the taxes it receives, the state does exactly the same as everyone else. It spends. For example, it builds a school and employs a teacher, Mr. Plum, who will produce a public service, education, in exchange for a salary, which allows him to invite Mrs. Plum for dinner at a local restaurant, Gino's, which will invest in a new frying pan, which will pay Mr. Ochre, who gets his hair cut at Rock Style, whose owner will buy a blue scooter in Miss Pink's shop. And, yes, she's the very same person who bought the peas earlier. Every minute, a great deal of spending combines with a whole load of production, triggering an influx of income, which leads to even more spending. And all these thousands of strings that overlap each other again and again, day after day, go together to make the circular flow. Enjoy your peas, Miss Pink.
In a nutshell, the circular flow of the economy exemplifies the flow of money in society. Money is sent back and forth between producers and employees in the form of wages and payments for goods. An economy is essentially an unending circle of money flow. Businesses and households both profit from the factor and product markets respectively.